All right, here we are. It's another week in beautiful Los Angeles, and we have Michelle Easter,
Yeah.
who works at NASA JPL with us this week.
Jet Propulsion Laboratories.
She actually she ended up giving me a tour of JPL, and it was pretty epic. Am I allowed to talk about that on the podcast? I don't know.
She gave us a tour in her mind.
I think we're allowed.
It was
to
a
talk
VR
about it.
tour.
I think we're allowed to talk about it.
Okay, good.
It was cool. I got to see like all of the raw data coming in from all of their landers and little satellites all over the place.
Whoa. That's dope.
I got to see.
Did you take pictures and
I did actually
put them up on the internet?
I can put them in our like show notes or whatever.
Whoa, really?
I can.
Very cool.
Yeah. So we were kind of actually talking a little bit about NASA and about kind of historically what that has meant for our country, and Matt has some interesting ideas.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know how interesting they are. But what I was thinking about is this idea of human beings doing things for the sake of it, right? It's a very basic concept, right? We do art for the sake of it. We do, there's like, with birth control, you do sex for the sake of it. Like, there's a lot of human beings doing things just for the sake of it.
And I feel like humans as a society, we only get to doing things just for the sake of it if we have like a certain baseline luxury.
Yeah, you gotta be in a privileged position, right? I mean,
correct.
Now that's true and it's not true. I mean, there are people who in the depths of poverty and despair are, singing and dancing and creating pieces of theater. I mean, I just saw this incredible article about these amazing plays coming out of Syria.
Oh, really?
These sort of theater of the oppressed style plays coming out of Syria, where these folks in refugee camps are creating like political theater and action.
Whoa.
And like going out and like touring around Ramallah with their pieces.
I actually saw a thing as well just today about like a bi-monthly kind of like teleplay on TV in Zimbabwe.
Whoa.
Like as a huge satire on like the Mugabe regime.
I heard about this.
Yes. And like super gnarly.
Yes. Sticking it to the
man very seriously.
Yeah.
And so anyways.
So there's some
people
but
create...
and that's often with purpose. But what's interesting to me in this whole NASA thing is like, it was a pissing contest during the Cold War, right? Mm-hmm. It was like, we got to beat the Russians to the fucking moon.
Well, because they beat us to space.
Right. So we got to beat them to the fucking moon. So we're going to spend billions and billions of dollars. And if you look at a graph over time, it's like money skyrockets for the NASA program. And then after the Cold War, it fucking drops off, and that's that.
Right.
But
as far as we know.
we got to get the Stranger Things.
Oh, yeah, we seriously do.
Feed that in. Just boom. Anyway, so the question becomes, it reframes the value of quote unquote doing things for the sake of it. Right. But if you look at throughout history, the explorers, the moonshotters, they are typically classically young folks.
It's true.
Right?
Have you seen the show Vikings by any chance?
No. Okay. Although I hear I look like a weird crazy Viking.
Yeah, I could totally
like a scrawny one though.
No, you could be like a shaman Viking. Like
interesting.
Like yes, you could be a warrior Viking, but I could totally see you like doing some weird like fucking like go up in a cave and like eat a bunch of weird plants and like tell people's futures and stuff.
I'm down. Sign me up.
Anyways, so in Vikings in the first season, main character Ragnar Lothbrok.
Wait, say it again 10 times.
Ragnar Lothbrok.
Whoa.
The whole premise of the first half a season is that he like goes to explore, beyond Viking land.
Nice.
And, goes to explore west, and he's young and basically has nothing to lose, and he's just like, I'm just going to do this because it seems like, why shouldn't I do it?
Yeah.
And so it makes me, what you're talking about makes me think of that as like exploration for exploration's sake.
Right. And on, young people's and in our case, millennials terms, right? I mean, not on our terms because it's somebody's funding it.
Correct.
And now, that NASA is having a little bit of a spring again. We saw, the president's been really trying to put some muscle behind the space program again. Mm-hmm. And we, Michelle's a product of that.
Yep.
And, we saw that cat with the mohawk with the rover landing.
Oh yeah, Michelle's friends with him.
Yeah, I mean that was like they're trying to make viral moments happen. They just put out these amazing posters. Did you see this?
I haven't seen them.
They put open source posters JPL did out for anybody to download, print out, whatever they want. They're really cool, well designed.
All right, we'll link to them in our show notes.
They're very cool. Anyway, so they're trying to bring that young spirit again.
Right.
Right? But there are these other companies like the Tesla and the SpaceX,
Hyperloop.
Yeah, where I
love that we just named Elon Musk's company.
Right. But the Musks and the Peshawars and the Spiegels, they're investing in explorers of the millennial generation, and this work is being done on the backs of 22 to 30-year-olds.
I read a thing a couple days ago about how the team that was on the moon landing, like the team of engineers, the average age was 28. So when Kennedy made his announcement of like, we're going to the fucking moon, all those kids were teenagers and like hugely shaped by kind of the thought of going to the moon. And it's interesting because it made me think about like, what is our equivalent? Like what is, so what 19-year-old right now is seeing kind of whoever the big person is. It's probably, it really probably isn't people in the government anymore. It is the people like Richard Branson or Musk or whoever is seeing like, we're going to go to Mars. And it's like, yeah, I'm going to fucking go to Mars, or I'm going to cure malaria, or whatever it is.
It's these aspirational, people that sort of give us a window into what an aspirational humankind could be.
Right.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like, and so then it was like, we're going to go to the moon. We're going to maybe start colonies there. Maybe we're going to live in space. There's all this imagination that starts to take place in the average person's mind.
Because I think it's about, one thing I feel like we ask our guests a lot is like, what is it that gives you hope?
Right.
And I think that's something that kind of ties in here is like, as long as there's the prospect of exploration,
totally,
and there's and with exploration comes change or new beginnings or like a reset button. Because I think a lot of people right now feel like, man, it would just be really sick if we could just hit a reset button on the past like year and a half.
Totally.
And I think that's what exploration. It could be geographical exploration. It could be space exploration, but it's also scientific exploration. Linguistic, whatever it is.
And we think of this as like a very American concept in some ways, like Westward Ho, right?
Right.
It's
Manifest Destiny.
Right. It's like it's sort of America kind of branded itself with this westward exploration, but it's not fucking American.
No, not at
it's
all.
Human. It's a basic
innate.
Human innate sense, and it's not confined to men or women or anything.
It's the reason
like
why
that.
There's human beings all over the world.
Totally.
Because we started off in East Africa, and if there was no innate desire for exploration, and obviously there was probably other factors contributing to this as well, but there is a desire to be like, oh, what's over the next hill?
And something that Michelle said that fascinated me was she was talking about, I want to be a link in this chain. So it's not this narcissism that like I, Michelle Easter, will change the world with my actions. It's that I will be a link. I will be a bee in this hive that is a link in this wider
It's an
change.
example of, oh, look, I was doing something that has nothing to do with anything that I'm doing 5 years ago.
Totally.
And now I'm building parts to explore, some moon of Jupiter or whatever, as opposed to walking down the catwalk.
Right. Well, totally. But and also that my link, that what programs I'm able to design for NASA is building on somebody else's research. Will build on somebody else's
and somebody will build on my research.
Exactly.
Nice.
So it's this collective legacy, right? Instead of the legacies of the few, right? So you have these few who are able to fund these things, but it really is these teams of, and right now in this moment, millennials, building the next sort of exploration moment. And we have an opportunity like this. There's a reason why the young explore. They've got the energy, they've got the hubris,
and the lack of responsibility.
They're not tied down. So we, as millennials, we're in this moment with 18 to 34. We can all find in ourselves the ability to be a part of that explorational hive.
I think a lot of us have this voice in us, especially if we're doing. I've done stuff in my life that I knew was the wrong path for me.
Totally.
I'm sure you have as well.
All the time.
We all have that voice in us that says, "This is the wrong path, dude. You're supposed to do something else. You're supposed to, manifest your gifts in a different way." So all of us have that voice, but she is one of the few people that not only listened to it, but acted in about as an extreme way as she could, and has a lot to show for it. So
and was relentless in her pursuit of her passion. She literally went from, like you said, walking the catwalk into Princeton University in a mere matter of years, teaching herself these things.
We loved having Michelle on and hearing her story. It's a really, really good conversation, and she has a lot of cool shit that she's working on that we get to hear about.
And she's just brilliant. She's a genius. And dude, before the cast, I was feeling a bit low energy. I don't know about you, right?
I was feeling a bit low energy as well.
We were like kind of noshy, but
so we were like,
slept very
dude,
much. What do we do?
We got to eat some morsos.
We got to get that Il Morso.
So that's what we did.
I had one.
We had the mocha flavor. There's Americano, coffee and cream, mocha.
What's your favorite?
Coffee and cream.
Right?
Yeah, it's
there's
the best
something.
one.
I mean, the mocha's growing on me.
Yeah.
I mean, they're all fucking good.
Yeah.
Mocha's growing on me, but that coffee and cream.
Coffee and cream's the one. So we each had one. It's great. You go on ilmorso.com and you type in promo code Millennials at checkout.
That's Millennials with an S.
Yeah. You get your own. It's going to be awesome. You're not going to regret it.
15% off.
15% off. ilmorso.com. Here we are, Michelle.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here.
It's my pleasure.
So, model to engineer at JPL. It's an interesting trajectory. I'm sure a lot of us are pretty curious about what that path was like. So, let's start at the beginning. Where are you from? How did Michelle come into being?
So I originally was born and raised in Maryland.
Okay.
And I grew up on a farm that has been in my family for over 100 years.
Oh, wow.
So I grew up working super hard as a standard. We were like a family-operated farm, about 100 acres. And we were powered by,
Wow.
family support. So
What kind of
farm?
what do you farm?
we had, when I was first born, we had chickens. We had about 100 black Angus cattle.
Wow.
And we also grew our own Timothy hay.
Uh-huh.
And then as I got to be more like a preteen, we got rid of the cattle and we got sheep. And the sheep were kind of brought in for my sister and I to like learn responsibility and how to be caretakers and kind of like learn the more in depth of the whole farmer life.
Right.
And it was really cool. And once we got the sheep also, we started harvesting more like soybeans and corn and things like that. Mm-hmm. So it's been kind of evolution of different things.
Why was it that once you got the sheep, you transitioned to other crops?
Well, they're lower maintenance as far as the amount of land you need to dedicate to them for
Right.
grazing because they're so much smaller per animal. And we
Right.
also had about, at the most, we had like half the number of head of sheep as we ever had cattle. So
got it.
we just had more available field space.
Cool.
Was it just your family, or did you guys have a lot of farm hands included
We
in
had
the
nothing. It
business,
was
or-
all our family.
Wow.
When I was really little, because we all lived on the farm together. It was very like a quintessential generational, like patriarchal type thing,
Sure,
where
sure.
like my grandparents lived there, and then we lived there with my parents and my
Wow.
brother, and chores were distributed based on general age. We kind of got like the butt end of the chores sometimes as kids, but I never noticed it actually. I always enjoyed participating in like this collaborative effort to kind of maintain the property.
How
And
many
it-
brothers and sisters?
I have one sister who's 18 months older than me, and I have a brother who is, I want to say 15 years older than me.
Oh, wow. That's a big gap.
Yeah, he's from my dad's first marriage, so
Got it.
we're halvesies.
I have one of those as well.
Okay, cool. Yeah, it's nice. It's like a bonus sibling.
And you said 100 acres?
Yeah, we had that property. It was about 100 acres, and my grandfather was born on that farm. His father was born on that farm.
Wow.
So it definitely goes back
A lot of
in
history.
our lineage. Yeah.
How did they come to have that property?
It actually shrunk down to that property. We used to also own a big chunk across the street that was the home place, so they call it. So that's where the house was, and then the place across the street, which now we have, was just for farming. So it was like the worked land.
Wow.
And
what part of Maryland? Like where in relationship to Baltimore?
It's about 20 minutes south of Baltimore.
Okay.
And so
close.
now it's like super suburban. It's becoming a lot more developed with like towns like Columbia, which is like the first planned community.
Yeah.
But our farm is kind of like one of the last ones hanging on, like
No
with all these
kidding.
developments that have spread it up around that. So actually, my sister and my nephew still live there right now. So
No kidding.
it's cute. Like my nephew gets to grow up in the house that my grandpa helped build.
That's amazing.
So it was a cool upbringing, and it definitely helped me to derive a lot of pride in the efforts of my ancestors, for sure.
Did you do like traditional public school, or were you homeschooled, or?
I did normal public school. It just so happens that in that county that I grew up in, we have some of the best public schools in the country.
Wow.
So we were very fortunate in that
Nice.
way. Yeah, and as I got a little bit older, so actually one of my favorite science projects that I got to do was actually when I was in middle school. And we were really fortunate that we're super close to Goddard Space Flight Center, which is the NASA facility in Maryland. And NASA has, as far as I've known, has always been really good about developing really nice outreach programs to engage kids in the community and try to get them thinking about space and science and STEM in general. So we got rounded up in one of my science classes in middle school and encouraged to do a research project on some technology that NASA had either developed or was using heavily. And so that was when I started researching infrared technology, and I found a bunch of really interesting applications for it, and made myself my first technical poster, if you will, like big bubble letters and like purple, like pastel purple infrared. Like you know, when I look back at it, it's funny compared to what I know more about the work of NASA as I'm older, but it was incredible, and I actually got invited to go to Goddard and do like a presentation of my little poster with a bunch of other little kids and stuff. It was really fun.
Did you feel like then that it sounded like you're pretty STEM oriented from very young age, but when you had that NASA moment, did you feel like, did it become an aspiration at that time? Like, were you like, oh, this feels right, or this feels like somewhere I'd like to go?
So that's a funny question. My answer is a little bit complicated, but like I always knew since I was little that I had a place in science and in STEM because it was something that I was naturally drawn to and that I naturally excelled at. But even going into NASA and, getting selected as a kid to present, some research that I did, it still seemed like something that was really far away from what was possible for me.
Sure.
And even though I had that moment that was super special, that even to this day is one of my proudest moments, I always think like, oh man, I was like a little child prodigy. It's so cool, But even thinking that, it was still super off my radar to even imagine that I would be able to work for NASA, It still felt like a dream for somebody else, maybe,
Do you think... What do you think formed that? Was it just society, you think, that formed that kind of how you saw reality, and that that was not something that could happen for you?
I think it was probably a couple of things. One being I didn't know anybody in my personal life that was like a scientist or an engineer. Like my mom is college educated. She has a master's in social work.
Nice. But
she's not in STEM field, although she's brilliant. And my dad is a brilliant man. He was an industrial mechanic.
Wow.
He was a farmer, and he's incredibly mechanically inclined, but he never had an education, and he worked, kind of local. I guess I was just never exposed to anybody who I saw doing it.
Right.
They weren't the role models.
Yeah, so it was kind of removed.
Yeah. Nobody does that.
Yeah, even like science teachers and stuff that I met and had in school. I don't know. I guess it never dawned on me that it would be possible. I guess maybe if I didn't have the right example to see,
Were you getting messages from mom and dad and brother and sister that were like, you can do anything? Like, was that sort of the vibe in the house?
Absolutely. And just a comment on that, now that I've gotten older and I've met a lot of women of all ages that are in the STEM fields, a common theme that I've seen in successful women in STEM is always incredibly supportive parents. The big factor, I think, in encouraging any like minorities in a field like STEM is, it's important to have support, and that support helps you to build your confidence to pursue something that seems possibly almost impossible.
Yeah. You hear that, mom and dad? Mom and dads, tell your kids you can do anything.
Anything.
Yeah.
And so in high school, did you kind of gravitate towards science as well, and that was something you excelled in?
Kind of. So in high school, as I got into high school, I was still the same person, but as I turned into like kind of preteen years, I got really into like makeup and fashion and stuff.
Nice.
And my mom was always super feminine. As much as she was a strong woman who really instilled values in us of, you know, standing up for what you know is right and pursuing the best that you can get for yourself, she was also super feminine.
Sure.
And I loved that. And I got super into makeup at a young age. And I originally, I thought I wanted to go study international communications. And my dad was a little bit uncertain of paying $40K a year for me to go to American University, which is where I really wanted to go.
Which is where I actually ended up going.
So ironic. It's so crazy. So he basically told me, like, oh, if you go to College Park for a couple of years and get good grades and show me you're serious, and we'll talk about it.
Build your way up.
And I thought, you know what? I don't want to do that. You know what I really want to do? I want to get my makeup artist license, and I want to be a makeup artist. And I went on, I got my makeup artist license up at a makeup school. God, what's the name of that school? I can't remember right now.
This was in Maryland?
In Maryland, yeah, just north of where I grew up. And after I finished, I absolutely loved it. I loved the feeling of being able to make people feel beautiful while being creative and artistic. And it's a very intimate experience.
Sure. You're looking at somebody's face and you're right in it.
Yeah. And so I loved it. And I ended up deciding that I wanted to move to Los Angeles because I wanted to do more makeup education.
Sure.
And I went to Westmore Academy in Burbank to get my special effects makeup training.
Oh, right on.
So that's how I ended up in LA.
Cool.
Originally, I was trying to do makeup, and I started doing it. I did a couple like indie movies to start building my resume. And while I was here, I started getting people asking me if I wanted to do modeling jobs. And at the time, you know, I was like 20 years old, like trying to pay my rent.
Sure, you're like, yeah.
Yes,
Sure.
like you're going to pay me to walk back and forth? Yes, please. Okay, cool. That's going to help me pay my rent. Let's do it.
Right.
So I started doing it, and then I met an agent who I ended up working with for years, who offered me a contract to go to South Korea to work in Seoul for 2 months with a couple other girls from the area. And, you know, I'm a farm girl. I never left the country before. I'm like, what? I get to go where and do what? Like, yes, let's do that, you know? So I did. So I took the contract and I went, and it just opened up a whole new chapter in my life.
Burbank to South Korea.
Oh yeah, that was weird. Yeah, it was super different. I had a couple of really amazing friends with me. This girl Izzy and this girl Jamie, who traveled. They were my roommates in LA. So we got to explore together, so it made it a little bit more comforting. But aside from that, you know, they dropped us in a model apartment in the middle of Nonhyandong, Seoul. Like, it was not like a...
Can you say that again for the microphone?
Nonhyandong.
Nice.
Wow.
I hope I
Very
said
good
that correctly.
Yeah, you did great. I mean, I think.
I don't know.
Sounds legit.
I learned in hindsight once I came back to the States and talked to Korean Americans that all the pronunciation of everything I tried to pronounce was completely ridiculous, which is why every time I tried to order any food, I never got what I expected because I was asking for something entirely different without knowing it. But yeah, it was a really crazy experience. You know, I got to see my first like really unusual street market with foods that I would never consider would be foods. And I also learned how to navigate in a city where the signs are not even in recognizable characters. You know, you're on your own and you want to do something, you have to, you know, learn how to really communicate with people. So it also tied in my love for, you know, trying to open up a whole other culture of people to communicate to.
So you went to South Korea, and was that was kind of when the modeling became your thing?
Yeah,
basically.
exactly. So once I realized that you can go to some country and live there for a couple of months, and you know your agents are going to advance the cost of your flight and help get you to your castings and stuff. I thought, oh my God, I want to do this more. This is awesome. So I reached out. It's funny, at the time, you know, I was just getting into modeling, so I didn't really realize that it wasn't the standard. But I just started emailing a bunch of agencies in different countries and sending my book and saying, like, hey, my name's Michelle. I want to come hang and work your market. Like, And I ended up getting picked up by an agency in Athens. So when I went back to LA after Korea, and then I packed my bag and I went right back to Athens. And it was super fun. I just got bit by the travel bug. And I ended up then getting picked up by a manager here in LA who sent me to Milan and then back to Athens. And And then I spent several months across a couple trips in Dubai working, and it was fun. I kind of traveled
What was
around.
Dubai like?
That's a good question. So the first time I went to Dubai, I was there for a week. And I went in July, actually, which was a horrible area. Oh my God, I had no idea.
120
it's like 125, and it's like 100% humidity, and you're literally like walking in boiling water all day.
Right.
Jeez.
The Burj Khalifa is just like sinking into the sand.
And, you know, from a distance, it looks like it's waving because of the heat and everything. But when I first went, I was really impressed with, you know, the sights and the architecture and the beauty of the city. Everything's brand new, and the architecture there is very aesthetically stimulating, I guess you could say. You know, a lot going on. So I was really into it, and I ended up going and meeting with an agency, and they picked me up and flew me back for a couple of months to work. And
this was like print modeling, runway?
Yeah, print, runway, informal stuff.
Right.
I did showroom, all kinds of stuff.
And everything.
Anything, if my agency wanted me to do it, and it's going to be something that I agree with, and it pays my bills, I'm down.
You're in, right?
Yeah.
Nice.
Dubai was weird though, because after I spent a little bit more time there, I started to enjoy it less and less because I started to really observe firsthand the nature in which that city evolved. And I really started to understand the sacrifices that were made by some for the benefit of others. And it's something that we're really sheltered from here in the States.
Sure.
You're talking about the migrant workers in Dubai?
Yeah, it was awful. I remember the first year I went, I think it was 07, and I remember it was July when I went, and it was like this huge deal because they had just finally instituted a rule that construction workers were banned from working outdoors between the hours of like noon and 1.
Right.
I'm like, well, duh. Like, can you
might-
imagine
you just
working on
might
like a
die.
200th floor? Well, what I found out later is that
a lot of them
companies were not required to take a death toll either. Not only were employees
Thousands of
dying,
people.
but thousands of people were dying, and they weren't even like obligated to report their deaths. And you know, it's very hard to walk into one of these super bougie, you know, resorts and know, like, Jesus, I wonder how many thousands of people died.
Yeah.
And you know, again, I can go on.
That's the
forever.
conversation people are having about the World Cup in Qatar when they come up.
Yeah, I've
Exactly.
never been to Qatar, so I can't talk on it. But I mean, I definitely, yeah, it's hard because actually, whenever it's literally the same reaction that you just had. Whenever I mention, you know, if I spent time in Milan and in Athens and Dubai and Korea and whatever, the one that people tend to pick on is, oh,
Absolutely.
Dubai, that's cool. What do you think? And I'm like, it's not cool.
It's not cool.
But
It's fucked.
yeah, it is.
Well, it's Disneyland on
For
It's
really
a
rich
facade.
people.
It's
Right.
just a facade.
It's
And there
Disneyland
was,
built
you know,
on with blood money
Oh,
and at the hands of people dying.
Absolutely, and there's a huge sex trafficking problem there,
Totally.
and
I was gonna
filtration
ask.
of terrorist activities because it's
Yeah.
a neutral zone,
Right.
and it's
I mean, you know, this is a very personal question, but I would think working in the modeling space in countries like that, there was probably people who, you know, were recruiting models for that kind of work as well. And I wonder, like, it's a pretty hard-hitting question, but did you ever feel like did you ever come up against that and had to push that away? Like, was that a part of your
personally
world?
never was exposed to
That's
something.
amazing.
Yeah, so I'm hesitant to answer directly, but what my answer should be is I never explicitly saw that in my own face. You know,
Yeah.
Right.
It might have been in the periphery. but
Yeah,
not-
exactly.
yeah.
That's not to say because, you know, it's important to keep in mind that that kind of thing is real. But
Sure.
I was very fortunate in that I never had that explicitly in my face.
Good.
Yeah. I can't speak for everybody though, and there
Sure.
are a lot of flaws with the modeling industry, which is an entirely other conversation also.
Yeah, we'll have to have you back to just talk
To
about
just
that.
do that. Yeah.
Bring back an entourage with me to talk about that.
Right.
There you go. Yeah, we can do
Well,
a
I
group
mean,
thing.
you know, there's a part of it that is pure expression, and fashion is art, and then there's a part of it that's exploitative, and that
Definitely.
that runs the gamut from
Yes.
just working a model too hard to asking her to prostitute herself.
Absolutely.
So there's like
and it's
all
a
kinds
really
of
big shame
spectrums.
that the industry is not regulated in the way that other industries are related to entertainment. For example, actors, they have a union.
Yep.
And they're
Powerful
pretty
union.
protected, yeah. But models, there's nothing that protects models or standardizes their pay or the amount of time you receive your pay in or the conditions under which you're working or the amount of time between when people have to allow you to sit down after standing or eat food after not eating, like the little things in life.
Right.
Or bathroom breaks, for God's sakes, or...
Things that keep us alive.
Yeah, exactly. But again, I can go on for a long time about that,
So
I digress.
so you were traveling around the world as a model, and take us through. So obviously now you're an engineer at JPL. So what is the transition from traveling around the world as a model to building crazy shit to explore space with?
Good
Well
question.
said.
Good question. I was doing well. I was making enough to pay all my bills and keep myself going. So switching didn't cross my mind. It actually is such a weird thing that triggered my change. I met this guy who I started dating, and he was like this little child prodigy. Not child, of course, he was above 18, okay. But really, really smart, and we met and we got along real well, and we started dating, and he hated that I was a model. He hated it. Which was the opposite of what I was used to experiencing, because
Right.
usually a guy is like, oh, you're a model, like
Right.
whatever.
Right.
Guys may be attracted to that for some kind of...
Like
Right.
trophy thing.
Yeah, exactly. And instead, this guy, I meet him, and he was really like not into it because he thought like, you're intelligent. How can you be satisfied doing this job that doesn't even allow you to plan for your future and that you can't necessarily grow with?
Right.
And so he wasn't one to tell me what to do. And so he actually decided to buy me this book. Of course, this is always a clever little tactic. But it was called Real Education by Charles Murray.
Okay.
And the book was about education reform.
Oh, nice.
And
Nice.
so I get this book and I'm thinking, like, why does he want me to read this? Like, education reform. This has nothing to do with me. I'm like, whatever,
Right.
I'll read it. He's smart and I respect him.
Right.
So I read this book and it's all about how in American culture, we tell kids, you have to go to college. When you finish high school, you go to college. That is what you do. If you don't do that, you're some kind of failure or you're
Right.
something to be disappointed in or something. Like you're going against, you're the salmon, like, and so this author was kind of like breaking that down and explaining why, there's different personality types. There's different people excel in different kinds of environments and doing different kinds of things. And some of those things and environments have nothing to do with a standardized education. For example, maybe you can have, a young woman who loves working on cars and that's like her jam. But like maybe she really does not excel in the academic environment for whatever reason.
Right.
But you're going to force her into this environment and have her spend, over $100,000 getting a degree that's only going to actually possibly bust down her ego. And for what?
And leave her
waste
in
4 years
debt,
of her life.
too.
Exactly.
Right.
When she could maybe just like start her own shop and be a business owner without having to get dragged through that whole thing.
Yeah.
And it's funny, I'm reading this and I'm like, wow, that totally makes sense. I super agree, and also for me, like, at that time I was thinking like, God, how much I've experienced and learned since I graduated high school? Like, how do you even know what you want to do with the rest of your life when you haven't even experienced the world?
Yeah.
It's just crazy.
Yeah.
And it's crazy that that's the standard. And so anyway, so the author goes on and he's basically explaining how like it's not good for the mentality and the self-esteem of some people to be in that environment. But what it actually reminded me was of little girl me back that used to love school and I used to kill it making my little own projects and I kind of like learned again for myself, actually that might be the kind of environment that would be really good for me. That would be
Right.
positive and help to build my self-esteem and to make me, feel confident and happy.
And that's not something you were feeling before?
Well, I didn't think that I wasn't. I didn't think that I wasn't.
I see.
I was I was happy.
Yeah,
I was
yeah,
like
yeah.
sleeping in. I could travel when I wanted. I got
Right.
to like go to free dinners. I got
Right.
like free clothes sometimes. Like
Right.
things are shiny in that world. You don't
Right.
know. Like it's not like I thought I was unhappy. But what I did know is that I didn't necessarily have a super clear plan for my future. but it's not something that you're shown that you have to really worry about, because I had been getting by for years, like doing fine. So
yeah,
I thought I was happy. You know,
it sounds like it was the mechanism that allowed you to expand your horizons, and then in expanding, you came back to, through a circuitous route, back to what was really important to you.
Absolutely.
What was important to the kid in you, or like, you know, your real passion.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if you took photos for a living to do that, so be it. But that just expanded you.
Absolutely.
And your horizons.
And that whole, it's funny because now in hindsight, you know, like I look at my time in fashion and I'm like, God, it was so fun. I loved it. And it really helped me to develop my own personal style and a lot of my own interests, and really helped me to, you know, culture my interest in art and all these things. And now I realize, and you know, it took me growing into myself as an adult, that I can embrace art and I can embrace fashion and I can wear makeup and I can do all those things, but I can also have a professional career in the STEM world. They don't need to define me. They're not mutually exclusive.
Right.
You know, I can have like personality traits that seem like they maybe conventionally don't go together, but like we're all individuals, so, you know, nobody else.
Do you think that speaks to a trend of our generation, that folks are starting to say, I can be this and this, I don't have to just be one thing?
Like multidisciplinary?
I think so. I think definitely, and I think a big part of that, and so I can speak on this in my experience, and I definitely know other people who could relate, but I think a big part of that is the younger generations now are rejecting gender roles more and more. And I think that has a really big part to do with it, you know, because like you don't have to define yourself, you know, for women, for example, you don't have to restrict yourself to a career that is traditionally seen as being for women. You can try other things, or you can be a feminine engineer, or you can be a feminine mechanic, or whatever. You don't have to be a stay-at-home mom, for example.
Right.
You can have any life that you want. And have
challenging stereotypes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the personality and the position don't necessarily have to be one.
Right.
Exactly. And it's funny. It's something that I try to remind people every now and then when they are shocked by like what I do and what I look like. And I say, like, my brain is inside my head, and it's like functionality is completely independent from whatever I look like.
Right. Sure.
They're both physical attributes of me, but they're not interrelated. Like whatever I look like, if I was my face but I was black, my brain would be completely the same brain. It would not change. So any combination of interests and hobbies and appearances and gender is completely unrelated from what your potential could be for your career.
And the key is potential, because certainly those kind of like outputs, what we look like as outputs, influence the way that people respond to us.
Absolutely.
So that affects nurture versus nature. But you're right. It doesn't mean that it's not possible. What you're saying is that, and what you're expressing as a human being is that anything is possible for anybody.
Exactly.
And that trajectory can be from point A to D or Z or W, and you're not going to be able to necessarily predict that.
Exactly. Because if you would ask me like 10 years ago, if you were to tell me that I'd be an engineer working for NASA, I would be like, I would laugh in your face.
Right.
It just was so far off my radar. I had no idea. So anyway, so rewind. So I read this book and I'm like, oh man, I bet you like probably I might be able to do some good stuff in school. I don't know. Like maybe let's try it.
Right.
And so I decided, because I had gotten used to traveling to pay my bills too, and having to be essentially on call. So school seemed like borderline impossible for me to even commit to. So I signed up I found the closest school to my house so that I would make sure I would go there.
Right.
And I signed up as a part-time non-degree student.
So just audit some classes.
Not audit. I was accumulating credits. But I wasn't in a traditional degree program. I was literally just trying to put my foot in the door to see, my foot stay in this door?
What's this like? What's this feel like?
Yeah, and honestly, the second I sat down in that classroom that first day, I was like,
What was the first class?
So my first classes, at the time, actually, I didn't really understand that I needed to do STEM for myself. And so what I remembered is, the last time I left off in school, I really loved language. And in high school, I took 6 years of Spanish condensed into 3 years. So I doubled up every year, and I loved it. And I was tutoring American students in Spanish, and I also started working one-on-one with this boy who had immigrated to the area from Bolivia, who didn't speak very good English, or didn't speak English well. Listen to me, I'm a tutor. So I would go to his house once a week and work with him and teach him things that I thought were helpful for day-to-day functionality. And I'd have dinner with his family and stuff.
Nice.
It was amazing.
Bolivian food?
Yeah, they spoiled me. It was awesome. They were the first ones to teach me the word for cow. We were at the dinner table having a conversation, and we were talking about different animals that we may or may not eat. And one of them said vaca, and I said, ¿Qué es vaca? They said, el animal quien dice moo. I'll never forget that. So yeah, vaca, cow. They taught me that.
There's a place in California called Vacaville.
And lots of burgers and steaks.
Tons of cows, and it just smells like so bad.
Oh, is that the place? Oh.
And you're driving through, and every time you drive by, you just go,
yeah,
Vacaville.
It's one of the worst smells
ever.
Yeah, it's great.
Well, anyways, yeah, I don't know. I'm not a big beef eater, so I can't comment on that. But I thought initially, like, maybe I would like to do language again.
Sure.
And so I tried initially to pursue that. So I signed up for an English writing class, because I knew you always have to take an English class.
Right.
And I took Greek and Latin roots of the English language.
Nice.
And
Useful.
Really useful.
Especially
Super
for STEM.
intuitive.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's funny. Like I had no idea. I was just trying to like pick classes that I thought I might like. And,
Right.
You weren't forced to be there.
Exactly. That's the biggest thing. So if you look at my overall like academic career, I did a really good job in college. And the biggest factor was that I was 100% there for myself.
Right.
It was my choice. It's what I wanted. I was testing myself.
Right.
Nobody told me to do that. And in fact, my parents were like dumbfounded when I told them that I wanted to try it. So it was society wasn't telling me, even actually my agents were telling me not to. Like,
Right, of course.
Because they wanted you to
it would take you away from your mom.
yeah,
right?
exactly. So it was an entirely different experience. All I wanted to do was just to kill it. That's all I wanted to do. It wasn't like I was thinking like, oh, I'm missing out on this party or whatever, because I tried all the parties. I did all the parties. They were
Right.
cool and stuff, but like they're
Right.
all the same after a while.
Right.
And so it became
Party's
way
a
more
party, a
fun
party.
and engaging to try something new and like to expose myself to different things to test my limits.
Well, it's interesting because there's this argument about millennials that we're extending the period of time between adolescence and adulthood, and that's inherently wrong or bad.
Interesting.
But what you have there is a counter argument, basically saying that if you kind of follow your adolescent passion to like go out and explore the world and just see what's out there and have some fun and just see where the wind blows, and then you come back to that passion, into adulthood you'll have more motivation.
Absolutely.
And you're going to be doing the thing that you want to be doing, so you're going to do better at it.
Right.
Absolutely. I totally agree 100%. And honestly, like, it goes back to, I think that if you look back like a few decades ago, I just think things were so different that it didn't lend itself to people being able to run off and explore themselves and to develop. Maybe they had, like maybe if this was like 50 years ago, look at me growing up on a farm. I probably would have had to stick around and work that farm, But we have evolving technology that helps and all kinds of things that make the world a different place now. And I think another big thing is like the fact that we have the internet and that we're this global village allows people from all over the world to see other people's experiences and other cultures and other things. And I think that it makes it harder for young people to be satisfied just picking something and going
Right.
with it if they know there's so many other things that they've never even experienced before.
Right. It's an embarrassment of riches in terms of options, and I think the bigger issue that we're facing, our generation, and even it will continue with the generations to come, is deciding what to do, as opposed to previous generations, kind of like
Being told
what to do.
Or, really only having a couple options, especially
Right.
if you look at like women, like look at women in like the 40s or something.
Yeah.
Like what are your choices?
Right.
Have babies.
Have babies, maybe be a secretary. I don't know.
Right,
I mean,
right.
I'm sure there was other options. I wasn't around then, so I don't know. But I do know that now, like, gosh, we have women in every field. We have women in the military now, and I'm
Right.
like, yes,
Yeah, right on.
yeah.
So you're taking a few classes, you're dabbling in, root words and Spanish and this and that. how does it evolve? How does it start to snowball?
So
how do you get
yeah,
back to STEM?
it's so funny. Like, so I grew up on a farm, and my dad taught us how to do woodworking since we were really little.
Nice.
And I loved it. I've always been like an artist type. I painted. I like to build things out of wood, just like I don't know, any kinds of things. And so in the summer months, the fashion industry tends to kind of slow down. It all but closes except for just a couple countries. And then in September, the beginning of September, it picks back up with Fashion Week. So,
Nice.
you know, the winter holidays and the summer is always like kind of a downtime. So after I finished my classes, I had some free time. And I had just gotten a dog that winter, and he's the apple of my eye.
What's his name again?
Rex.
Rex.
What kind of dog?
He's a Japanese chin.
Okay. Very
Rex-
intelligent
Rex
dog.
and Sugar should have a play. Oh my god.
I know, I should have brought
Sorry,
him.
time out podcast, but Sugar is sleeping in a pretty ridiculous.
For those of you listening, he's on a white bedspread and is white and is the most adorable thing ever.
Super cute.
Camouflage.
The only thing here would be if Rex was here too with him.
There you go. Anyways,
So,
sorry.
so Rex is he's a 7-pound Japanese chin, and I've always been obsessed with animals. I've always been an animal lover, and so I decided, you know what? My dad has a sawmill down in Maryland, and he had just cut up a bunch of lumber. And I said, "Hey, Daddy, like, can I come down, grab your truck, and haul some lumber up and do a little project?" And my dad was like, "Sure thing." He always supported me getting into his interests, of
Right
course.
on. Right on.
Nice.
So I had just gotten a compound miter saw as a gift because I've been nagging my dad to give me one just to have it in case I needed
Dad, I
to.
want a compound miter saw. Come on.
Come on, seriously.
Yeah, whose Santa list is that on? That's amazing.
Mine. And so I also had like a jigsaw and some other stuff. I loved having like a power tool collection just in case.
Sure.
And
Right.
so I haul all this lumber up, and I thought, all right, I'm going to build a doghouse for my little dog, and it's going to be a puppy castle because he's a king, hence his name. See, now bringing in the Greek and Latin
Rex.
roots of the English language.
Yes.
Yes,
Very
yes.
cool.
So I started, I took my tape measure and I measured his little body. I measured his shoulder width. I measured the height from the floor to the top of his head when he stood his tallest.
Sure.
And his length, of course, you know, the whole thing, because I decided that I wanted it to be that when he was standing in the doorway would exactly frame his little body. So it would look like the eyes, and he would be standing in the mouth. And so it would look like he was standing, you know, barking to his royal subjects out of his
Right.
own face. And so, you know, I started sketching away, and I had I had lumber, and so I had to design in panels. And so I had to sketch it out based on the cuts that I needed to make in panels, given the tools that I had. So I laid all the side panels in the base, and I built that. And then when it came time for the roof, you know, it was Manhattan in the summer. It's hot.
Yeah.
And Rex is super furry, and so I didn't want him to be uncomfortable. So I decided to try to implement some kind of ventilation concept.
Sure.
So I'm thinking, all right, like, what can I
Doggy
do?
AC.
You know, he's got to have the best.
Right.
So I started looking around online and trying to poke around and see like what would fit, because it was kind of small. And I found that you can actually get lots of chipped and scratched solar panels off of eBay. And they have
Nice.
a reduced efficiency because of the chips or the scratched, but they still work. And so you just need more surface area given the reduced efficiency to power something that requires whatever power. So I found a little a desk fan not a desk fan. I found a little computer ventilation fan.
Okay.
And I started trying to calculate, all right, you know, given the power requirements of this fan and given the reduced efficiency of these solar panels, what kind of surface area do I need of solar panels in order to power this fan? And so what I found is that, you know, solar at that time was already pretty inefficient. It's 2010, especially in the consumer space. And especially with a reduced efficiency, I had to like build him a whole awning and like a patio, and like there's no way. So I'm like, all right, no, scratch that. No solar power for now. And then I started looking at other options, and I learned about passive ventilation, which is more of like a structural control of airflow.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, that sounds a little bit more practical,
Yes.
you know, and I don't have to worry about
You can
building
get the
him
design
a hole.
right. He'll be cool.
Exactly. So I did that, but the whole point that I ended up finding out through this process is like, I'm out here doing this for fun. I'm doing this for fun. Nobody told me to do this. I'm literally having a good time, like fantasizing about this cool castle for my little puppy. You know, I airbrushed the whole thing with my airbrush that I had from my makeup kit. Like, it's like
You're just bringing
tons
it
of
all
crossover.
together.
Yeah. And the bigger thing that I really understood, though, is like, I'm doing all of this without anybody helping me. I don't have any education. I don't even remember basic math. You know?
Right.
And I'm doing all this by myself, what if I actually got
a degree,
a proper education?
Right.
Yeah, I bet you, like, maybe I could probably do, like, some cool stuff. And obviously I like it. I'm doing it for my own devices. So I took Physics 101. And it was, like, super introduction to physics, like, not even real math, like algebra. Like, that's it, you know? Just physics concepts. But there was two really cool things about this. One was that I had never taken physics when I was younger. I was never exposed to it. And it was... oh my God, like the lost science that was made for me. I loved it. Like physics is so intuitive. It is everything in the physical world around you. So you can almost feel it intuitively understanding what physics is.
Sure.
So I just like formed like a real immediate bond with the subject. But perhaps more importantly, the teacher of that class. Oh my God, I love him so much. He became my mentor, Professor Godfrey Gums. He, by a fluke.
What a great name.
Oh my, yeah, his name is God, you know.
Godfrey Gums.
Yeah,
Shout
Godfrey
out to
Gums.
Professor Gums.
Oh, he's the man. I can't even, wow, that's a whole other tangent about how wonderful he was. But, you know, I sat front and center in his class and I was answering all the questions I could because I just loved it. And he just saw my enthusiasm and he took interest in me. And so I went to him at the end of the semester and I asked for advice. You know, I want help in trying to plan my course selection so that I could pursue engineering. Will you help me?
Awesome.
And he was like, yes, absolutely. You know, he saw I was enthusiastic. He saw I was passionate. He made time to support me, despite the fact that, you know, this was a school of like 40,000 students or something ridiculous like this. You know, he had his plate way full. He was doing his own research. And, you know, I'm some part-time, non-degree student who's banging on his door asking for help.
Right.
And, you know, not to mention the fact that many professors could very easily look at somebody like me and not take me seriously.
Right.
You know, I remember one time I had to go right from a runway show for Fashion Week to his class, and I didn't have time to fix my hair, and they had teased me into this big ridiculous red afro and painted my face white. It was like an edgy designer. They painted my face white, whited out my eyebrows, and I had black lipstick.
Oh my God.
And like, I don't know if you guys know,
probably
but like,
looked terrifying.
I looked ridiculous. You know, I put a beanie over my like fro, but like it was huge, and like I was just like, you know what, whatever. Like I'm not missing class. I want to be there.
Right.
Yeah.
And I just ran right to class, and I'm like, you know what, like all these like ridiculous little things, and like he never ever flinched. He always just like maintained this like complete 100% support. He also helped to get me my first internship at Kirtland Air Force Research Laboratory, where he got me involved in doing quantum optics research.
Wow.
For
what's that?
Nobody even knows. It's actually just understanding quantum properties of materials in order to strategically design optical phenomena.
What's that?
So, for example, so I was there 2 different summers, and the research is a little bit different each time. But, for example, you can use things that are called metamaterials, which are engineered materials, and you can engineer physical properties into them to get results that you want.
Whoa.
So we studied. It's incredible. It's absolutely incredible.
That's terrifying and awesome.
It's great. Actually, there's tons of biomedical applications because we found that you can use properties of the interface between a metal and a dielectric to create a lens out of something that, one, we don't necessarily see as traditionally translucent at all, but 2, the result is that you can get a shorter focal distance and higher resolution by using quantum properties to incorporate into lens and imaging.
So more powerful equipment for doctors and
exactly.
researchers. And, wow. Amazing.
So, yeah, that was super cool, and I learned a lot from that, I tell you, for sure. But, you know, he basically threw me in the deep end on that. You know, the first year I went to go do that, I hadn't taken quantum, I hadn't taken optics, I hadn't taken linear algebra, I hadn't taken diffie-q. Like, I was like, oh my God, I show up, and I'm like, you want me to do what?
Right.
But he constantly threw me in the deep end and then just stood behind me to give me support if I needed it.
Nice.
And it was the best. You know, he allowed me to build my own self-confidence about my abilities in that way. You know, another result was that I ended up developing, you know, better confidence speaking in public, doing technical presentations. Oh my gosh. And he helped me build my resume. You know, I had nothing. I had, a decade of modeling. Like, who's going to hire me or take me seriously?
Right.
So then you eventually transferred somewhere else?
Yeah, so he also helped advise me on my transfer.
Wow.
And he was the one who mentioned Stevens Institute to me, which is the university where I ended up transferring into. And I really wanted to try to do something a little bit more hands-on, application-based, to set me up better for an engineering job. So he introduced me to this incredible man, Dr. Marlon Scully. He's very involved in laser physics and quantum science and engineering. And so my mentor brought me, we went on basically like a family field trip with a couple of his other physics students like me that he kind of has under his wing.
Nice.
And we all went with like Papa Gums,
Right.
and he took us to Princeton where Dr. Scully was hosting a conference with a
Wow.
bunch of people talking about quantum and quantum optics and stuff. And so he introduced me to Dr. Marlon Scully down there and, just praised me and pushed me in. And Dr. Scully offered, based on my grades, which that was the first thing he asked, what's your GPA? I had a 4.0. So I was like, 4.0. I was like, thank God. Okay, he's got me. So he pushed me over. He was impressed with my experience at the Air Force and my GPA and my ambition. And he pushed me over to Princeton to go work for Dr. Simon Sakewar, who's a researcher in the plasma physics department over there.
Plasma physics.
Yes.
What is that?
So plasma is another state of matter, actually. It's basically the sun. It's a giant ball of flaming plasma, but it's ionized gas. And so it just, plasma physics would be understanding the physical behavior of that form of matter.
Very cool.
And so he put me initially on an experiment, which was... It's super cool. It's a brand new method for laser vision correction, using short pulse lasers to ablate tissue to reconstruct the shape of the cornea of the eye. And so he puts me on this experiment, and one of the things that I did is I went to one of the technicians who had been working in this lab for years, and I was asking him questions and getting his advice on the high voltage setup in that lab. And so he was real talkative, real friendly, and he was telling me about the experiment. Oh, this experiment, it's been running for a while. It's really neat, but, it's a shame. Like, all the optical stages are all operated manually, and, we really need to find some kid who's good at robotics or something who come in here and automate it. And I'm like, shut up. Oh, my God. It's like, ding, the light goes on in my head, and I'm like, I just found myself my first project to help build my resume.
Wow.
And so I was super not confident, though, because I was like, I don't know, like, am I actually going to be able to pull that off? So that was Friday. I go home that weekend, and I do all this research, and I hack around, and I, try to think, and finally I'm like, yeah, I can do this for sure. I'm going to ask him. So I went in on Monday, and I went to Dr. Sakewar, and I said, Dr. Sakewar, I watched your experiment, and Tahi Han, the grad student who's running the experiment, he stands there for an hour, and he has to watch and watch and watch and turn the knob, and watch and watch and watch and turn the knob. And so I said, will you give me a little bit of money and let me build you a system to partially automate your experiment? And he said, yes. Are you kidding? Like, yes, please do. I thought, oh, wow, cool. All right, sure. So he kind of unleashed me on his experiment and let me design. So that was so fun. So what I did is the eye under test was under a microscope. So I got a little webcam, and I positioned it to look inside the microscope.
Right.
And I fed in the video footage into MATLAB, and I wrote image processing software that scanned each snap of the image every time that I snapped and tracked the position of the laser with respect to the image. So you can essentially track how the laser moves around in this eye. And then based on how I wanted it to ablate the tissue inside the eye, you can command the motors to rotate the eye.
Goodness gracious.
So it was super fun.
This was in Princeton still?
Yes.
And so how long were you there?
Well, so that was supposed to be like a 1-month internship. And so that was my month. And my boss, he didn't expect that that's what I was going to do. So after I finished, he invited me, hey, by the way, Michelle, I've got this other experiment across the hall. You want to come automate that one too? And I was like, wow, this is awesome. Yes, I totally do. After I did the first system, Dr. Scully hosts this conference. It's called, and I might butcher the name a little bit, but it's basically a quantum science and engineering conference that he holds in Wyoming every year. And so he flies in Nobel Prize winning scientists and a bunch of his researchers, and he goes and it's basically several days back to back of complete and total genius wizards giving talk about their latest research. And so he invited me, since I was working for him, to go to the conference. So he paid to send me.
Wow.
And I had to stand up and talk about my research from the previous summer. So I'm like, oh my God, I'm so nervous. I got to stand up and talk about, it was from the Air Force from the previous year. And so for that one, we talked about basically coupling a quantum dot with a surface plasmon polariton, which is a quantized oscillation of electron density at a metal and dielectric interface.
No, totally. Got it all.
But it's quantum optic stuff, you know. But so I had to stand up and talk about my research and stuff. And the worst thing is I only had like 5 minutes, which is always the hardest.
Sure.
You know?
Goodness gracious.
But I stood up and I rattled off all this stuff, and I was also, you know, I was really honored to be there working for Dr. Scully. So before I got there, I had written up this really, really in-depth report of the system that I was building for him, you know, with images of my CAD and discussing how I did the image processing and all that stuff. So at some point, I cornered Dr. Scully just to thank him for bringing me and giving me the opportunity to listen to all these talks. And I wanted to show him what I was building back at Princeton. So I showed him my report, and he looked down at it, he flipped through it, and he looked at me, and he said, like, wow, he's like, when do you graduate? And I said, I graduate next year. You know, I was going into my senior year, so that was the summer before my senior year. So I said, you know, I don't know, I think about maybe graduate school or something, you know. And he says, well, do you want to come work for me? He's like, what's your GPA? And I'm like, I have a 4.0. And there was a woman standing next to me who was one of the coordinators for the conference, and she and I had kind of befriended each other. And she said to Dr. Scully, I would love to have Michelle around. She'd make it so much more fun of a workplace, you know.
Nice.
And Dr. Scully goes, I don't care at all about that. He was like, you know what I care about? He was like, she's a good student with a 4.0. Michelle, do you want to come work? And I'm like, holy crap, oh my God, like, Dr. Scully, are you kidding me? Like, I'm getting hot, like, oh my God. And so I was like, wow, this is crazy. Like, I'm in this room with these, like, geniuses, and they want me to work with them, you know?
And like 4, 5, 6 years ago before, you were, you know, in a room with a bunch of models being seen as a model.
Yeah, so it was like such an honor for me. And it was a huge boost for my confidence. And, you know, what I thought was like, oh my God, it's like more than a dream come true, you know, which is how I describe this whole last couple of years in general. But what I really started thinking is like, how could I ever turn this man down? How could I? This is an incredible opportunity. If I got to work for Dr. Scully, oh my God, I can't even imagine, you know. So then I had to get serious and really think, you know, I'm going into my senior year and this is my future. Right. I need to think about, you know, if I'm going to go the graduate school route, that means I need to take my GREs or whatever, and I need to prepare for that. And so I started thinking, what on earth would be something that I would be willing to say no to Dr. Scully for? It would have to be like the craziest shit ever.
Wow.
You know? And so I started thinking, you know, and I didn't even think NASA yet. Still, I didn't even think NASA. Right. What I did think, though, because I thought that for engineering, you have to get a higher degree. I thought, like, how can you get a good job with just a bachelor's, you know? And so I assumed I had to get a master's at least. So I started looking around, and I loved Caltech. I really wanted to go to Caltech.
Yeah.
You know, the student to faculty ratio is amazing. It's a really small student body, which
internationally ranked every year.
Oh my God!
Yeah.
Oh my gosh! And if you look at the history of people who've researched and worked there, it's so impressive.
Giants.
Yeah, and so I decided maybe I should try to apply because I graduated at the top of my class at Stevens. So I thought, all right, now I've got a little bit of cred. You know, like maybe I can get in there. I don't know, but I didn't know anything about applying to engineering master's program. Like I didn't even know who to ask. You know. And so I had a girlfriend of mine who used to also be a model who decided to go back to school and became a medical doctor.
Right on.
Total boss.
Nice.
She had mentioned to me when I got my first internship at the Air Force, oh, that's so cool, Michelle. You know, my friend's husband works for JPL. Like, if you ever have any questions about that field, you should. And I'm like, oh, my God. So, like, I remember this and I'm like,
wait, so let's just recognize the networking here was through models.
Yes.
So again, right, another argument. Don't judge those books.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, a model who became a physician who saves lives.
An
now.
MD.
Yeah.
Who's like, hey, JPL.
So she connects me with this guy. I shoot him an email and I'm like, hey, like, you know, I don't know anything about applying to grad school, but maybe I was hoping to ask you some questions about Caltech and the kind of research that goes on there. And, you know, like, I don't know, maybe you can connect me with somebody who I can meet with to ask questions. I don't know. Like, I'm just trying to, like, find some info, you know? And so, you know, the guy writes back and he's like, oh, sure, send me your resume and I'll see what your interests are. And I'm like, okay, cool. So I send him my resume. And at the time, I had 3 physics co-authorships because of my physics research, and I had worked, you know, several months at Princeton, but I'd built that system, and I had a bunch of outreach experience, and then I also had this interdisciplinary background. So I sent him my resume, and he writes me back, and he says, you know, Michelle, you actually have a really good resume. Have you ever thought about applying for work at JPL?
Whoa.
I'm like, nope. Nope. I have not. Funny you mention it. What? And he says, yeah, you know, I can't recommend you at all because I don't know you, but I'm happy to pass your resume to somebody at work tomorrow. And I'm like, oh, yeah, all right, sure, cool. Like, so the next day he goes into work and he walks past the head of mechanical engineering in the hallway. Oh, I've got this girl's resume. You want to see it? Oh, sure. And the next thing I know, that evening, I get 2 back-to-back emails from the deputy division manager of mechanical and then the division manager. And I'm like, I'll never, ever forget the day I was home. I'll never forget it. I was home. I was sitting at my desk doing homework, and I get this email, and it's like from NASA, and it's like, what? And it's like, hey, I'm looking at your resume, and we're really interested in having a phone call to see if you might want to work here. And I'm like, shut the fuck up! I like, jumped out of my seat. I'm like jumping around, and like, oh my god! I call my girlfriend. I'm like, you're not gonna believe the email I just got. It's from NASA. Like, holy crap! Like, total mind blowing. And so like that evening I had a phone interview with them and it went well, and they're like, we want to fly you out and interview you. Like,
Wow.
Oh,
and how, when was this?
This was, it was August before my senior year.
Okay.
So you hadn't even graduated yet?
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. So we set it up and they flew me out to interview right before I started the semester. And I had 2 days back to back of interviews because of my interdisciplinary background. I had 4 different divisions interview me, so it was a lot of interviews. Sure. And it was incredible. And they offered me a job. I couldn't believe it.
Wow. Did they do that over the phone, or that was in person while you were there?
No. So I interviewed for 2 days, and then I flew back, and they all kind of convened and discussed, and then they let me know within a couple of weeks.
What was that moment like?
Oh my God, I was in class. I'm like, I'll never forget any of the whole process. I was in class. I was in my mechatronics class, and I was.
What's that?
Good question. So mechatronics, that's actually the name of the group. So I'm technically, my title is mechatronics engineer. Cool. And mechatronics is a field that basically integrates mechanical design with electronics and with embedded programming. So it's really similar to robotics in a lot of ways.
Got it.
So I'm in my mechatronics class. It was part of my robotics concentration. And I'm sitting there in his evening class, and I get an email, and I look at it on my phone, and it's, you know, from the head of mechanical, and it's like, hey, Michelle, like, you know, it was end of fiscal year, so we're having some tie-ups with HR and stuff, but I just want to let you know that we're definitely sending you a job offer, and we all love you, and like, we want to. And I'm like, Michelle, I like literally jumped out of my seat. I'm like, excuse me, professor. And, like, I like run downstairs, and like, oh my God, I called my mom, and I'm like crying, and I'm like, oh my God, you know, like walking up and down. I was just like blown away. I'm like, holy crap, this is just unbelievable. And then I'm like, and of course in his email's like, but you got to finish your year, get your degree, and continue your performance. And I'm like, oh God, I just want to go work for NASA now. Please take me. It was incredible. It's absolutely unbelievable. I still sometimes don't believe it.
So how long have you been at JPL?
I started last August, so I'm coming up on 1 year.
Wow. And what are you working on?
Oh gosh. So I have 2 main projects I'm working on right now. I've done a bunch of stuff since starting. The one that I find the coolest is I'm working with an amazing team, and we are developing, right now we're working on developing test beds for the Europa lander. Nice. And specifically to help facilitate the development of the sampling system for the lander. And it's been incredible. I've learned so much. We're basically right now, we're knee deep in design and building a medium size. I say medium because if I say big, people laugh at me because at JPL we have the 25-foot space simulator. So the fact that it's a 5-foot simulator, people, you know, they shake a stick at it all day. But anyways, it's a cryogenic vacuum chamber, and we designed it such that we can do a rapid iteration of sampling by having multiple other vacuum chambers that are interfaced with the sides of the chamber and separated through gate valves, so that we can basically seal off the environment and maintain vacuum and open these sub-chambers and drop samples in, close them, pump them down, and pop samples in and out without breaking conditions. Right. And I'm also developing the robotic arm that goes inside the chamber, to which we can mount different end effector designs. So there's a team of people that are developing different cutting tools that we think might work in cryogenic ice.
So back up.